in tandem with the astrology and with the other spiritual dimensions that we are dealing with, this is just an unprecedented time. So I think that it is very escalated in terms of these power issues, power struggles. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to say that, right? And yet it is the beginning of this very, very monumental transition that we're all going through globally. Now, what we're moving into in 2025 is the end of a cycle. It's the end of a cycle. So the nine is about completions, it is about letting go. It is a high spiritual dimension, it is a highly spiritual vibration.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Shifting Dimensions podcast. I'm your host, Julie Moses, and thank you again for tuning into the show. I have the pleasure of speaking with Felicia Bender. I've had her on the show before, not Shifting Dimensions, on my other podcast called A Word to the Wise, where we dove really deep into numerology. And I have her back on the show again so we can discuss the upcoming energy for 2025 with, numerology being the focus. So welcome to the show, Felicia Bender. Thank you so much
Oh,
for joining me today.
I'm really excited to go over all of this numerological nuggets that we're going to get to talk about.
Yes, for sure. And the way I kind of want to structure this, right, is of course I want to talk about what numerology is. I don't want to take for granted that the audience exactly knows what that is. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about it, but it'd be nice to hear a refresher. I'd also love to talk about how you got into it. But the main thing I really want to discuss today is the energies we experienced in 2024, what the universal year number was, and what the universal year number will be for 2025, and what we can expect and so much more. So, really excited to talk to you. So, again, I want to start off with what is numerology and how did you get into it?
Well, numerology, well, that's the $64,000 question. Really, what I have to say also is that it's kind of a cosmic joke that I actually do numerology because I really despise math. And I mean that sincerely. So if any of you are out there and going, I'm not sure if I really want to listen to this, it's about math. It really is not. What I have found is that numerology actually is a language. It's not mathematics at all. It's a coding and a language. And so numerology itself, I practice Pythagorean numerology. That comes from Pythagoras. I don't know if you were paying attention in math class, were you, to the Pythagorean
Yes, I
theorem?
was.
Okay, you smarty pants. So I was not, by the way, I was not paying attention to that at all. And yet it's the same guy. So he was a Greek mathematician, mystic, from what we can understand. He was very much into astronomy, astrology, music, vibration, and the coding that comes in with that. So, on a very basic level, the way that I like to kind of comprehend or even talk about numerology is that the concept behind it is that numerology is not just numbers that you can count with, right? A quantitative value, like one apple, two apples, that we can count with. And this concept is that numbers carry with them a vibration. They carry a frequency. They carry code and data. So whenever each of these numbers shows up anywhere in the universe and anywhere in our lives, and particularly with numerology, what we can also do is very much like in astrology. In numerology, we take your full name as it appears on your birth certificate, and then also your date of birth, and we can run an entire chart for you personally that give you a really great blueprint, a really great framework about what your soul's purpose is. Why'd you check in this time, right? What are you learning? How you're going to go about that. It looks also at cycles of time. So that's really what we're focusing on very specifically today are certain cycles of time that we can determine energetically what is being supported, what is being offered to us during this time. And it can give us the highest resonance of that, right? The optimal of that. And then it can give us the caveats. It can make us understand what's going to be challenging during this time as well. So in that regard, that numerology can be used for all kinds of things in this way. So many of you out there may say, well, I see the number 1111, right, on the clock. And that has significance in terms of what it's offering us, what its message is, any kind of repeating numbers, all kinds of things, your home address, right? So we can go on, and it becomes very fun when we start looking at things not as just, I don't know, boring little random things. Like you start looking at the receipt that you get from your grocery store and you're like, oh my gosh, 5555, what does that mean? And it's a messaging system that really we have access to from our spirit guides, from our, I call it the cosmic support team. And when we begin to notice these, it begins to interact with us even more, right? When we can read the messaging. So the way I would say it also, I think it's very good visually kind of to understand that to me, it's a code. So when we can understand the code as a language, we begin to really determine what the information and the knowledge that is being given to us. So it's very much like if you walked into a room and there was Morse code going off, right? Beep, 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 beep. If you don't know Morse code, that's just really annoying. You just like you want to get out of that room as fast as possible. So you get out of there. Now you walk into the same room, same Morse code, and you know Morse code. You've been trained in that somehow. You can go, oh man, there's some really significant information that's being shared here. Give me a notebook. I want to write it down. And so it's that same sort of thing. We can kind of blunder through life not knowing the language and not knowing the code, and it's there all the time, and yet we have to in some ways learn what's happening for us. So that is a very 101 idea about what numerology is. And how I got into it, again, the nutshell there. I had kind of one of those spiritual awakenings in my early 30s. I had the death of my mother died, all kinds of things. If you're out there and you have had one of those dark night of the soul experiences, or anything that has been that has brought you to this channel, right, to listen to what you're talking about consistently here with the inner dimensions and spiritual thought and all of that. Usually that comes from some kind of very difficult experience, right? That never comes just easy breezy. Oh, I'm feeling great today. I think I'll really dive deep into my shadows. Right? That sounds like fun. Not really how it works. So for me, it was the same. And I truly didn't come across numerology until a bit later in my development. I did the spiritual gauntlet at the beginning. I'm certified with pranic healing, which is a energy-based modality. I've just explored all kinds of things. And for me, I'm a very practical, pragmatic, and somewhat skeptical person. And I was looking for a modality that really was more systematic. And numerology came across, it found me. I did not find it. And I will always say, what is meant to find you will find you. You can run, but you can't hide. So I may have been running a little bit, but not too much. And I discovered it, and I just do it was just amazing to me. And what I love about it is that I'm simply the translator, the interpreter, and you just can't make it up. I mean, the numbers never lie. So it is just a tool and a modality that really spoke to me, and that's when I just took off with it, and it really informs just the way that I live life on the daily.
That's a very powerful story that you shared there about having sort of like a dark night of the soul. And it's I I find it interesting and kind of annoying that that's really the spiritual catalyst for a lot of us, right? Where something is going on in our lives that we cannot grapple with, and we're kind of we've reached a wall and we need to transcend it. And we have no other choice but to seek out the divine, right? In whatever fashion or way that appears to us. For you, it was in numerology. And I've always been fascinated by numerology because I think it kind of feeds into the argument that we live in a simulation or a holographic reality, because the fact that numbers have frequency and there's a spiritual vibration to numbers, and I see numbers all the time, right? As the years go by, they become more intense, and the number of variations like 1133, repeating ones and sevens. So I constantly see that, and I realize that those numbers show up for me when I'm getting to a new level of consciousness and understanding. And those numbers kind of validate what I'm experiencing. And people have also said that too, when it comes to repeating numbers, 1111 has a specific resonance, but it's kind of up to the individual to kind of figure out what that number particularly means for them in that moment. So that's another interesting thing when you talk about learning how to decode the numbers, and really using the numbers as a tool to understand our life and what's happening around us. So thank you so much for breaking that down. And I also love that you said that you're a very practical person and you do call yourself the practical numerologist. Can you just kind of give a little bit more insight into why you call yourself the practical numerologist?
Well, it was one of those things where I feel as though I'm just I mean, I think the term woo-woo is a little overused. I mean, I'm as woo-woo as the rest, as anyone, and yet I think it's very off-putting, and people dismiss that as woo-woo, and just to say woo-woo is a very dismissive term. I think we're hopefully reevaluating that, but for me, I find that we can go down as many slippery spiritual slopes as we want to. And that's all well and good, but I want to know how is this going to help my human life here, right now, right? How is this going to help my finances? How is this going to help my mental health? How is this going to help my relationships? How can I really extract my sense of purpose that I'm longing for through this? And if I can't do it, I think that we check in these human bodies in this right now, right here, right now for a reason, and we can, envelop or fold in this spiritual experience, and yet it's a part of the spiritual experience is coming to terms with human life, right? And so there is a practicality to that we need to take into consideration, or at least that I feel that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I think a lot of these tools, I like to call them spiritual sciences. I think everything is spiritual. I think math is
Me too.
spiritual. But, when it comes to numerology, astrology, human design, I consider these spiritual sciences that kind of give us the tools to better understand ourselves. So I agree with you. You can't just know it on a baseline level. You have to kind of take that knowledge and make it practical in your everyday life and in your evolution. So is
Mhm.
numerology kind of similar to astrology? I know they're not similar, but do they kind of have the same, I guess what's the right question here? Does numerology influence astrology? Do they influence each other or are they siloed?
I think that they're like intimate tango partners. I mean, they're intimate dance partners in the universe. Because of course, astrology is about the stars and the planets and the alignments there. Numerology is about frequency, and so it all converges, right? It's all together. I jokingly say with my astrology friends that once you know both your astrology and your numerology, you're out of excuses. So, what I find is even as we move into the energies numerologically of 2025, it very much is in tandem with the astrological energies, with what's going on astrologically. So they bring in a full spectrum, I find. And so they always complement each other, is what I find. And I think it's really a beautiful experience to be able to understand, at least on a base level, both aspects of yourself as an individual, but also if you're looking looking into, again, like we're going to be looking at this universal energy, let's look at what's going on astrologically, because I will also say I know just enough astrology to be dangerous. So I'm really into astrology, and yet I'm not an astrologer. So, but what I am aware of is that we have just gone through an amazingly significant transit with Pluto moving out of Capricorn, where it has been since 2008. And we're now moving into Pluto in Aquarius for the next 20 years, I gather, if that could give or take. And it's a very significant shift. I mean, we're feeling it. If you're not feeling it, you're blindfolded, and I don't know what you're doing. If you're just going, and that's one of the things that we'll be discussing here, is that I think if there's only one thing to take away is that it is not business as usual, right? It just isn't. And if you expect it to be business as usual, if you expect to go back to XYZ, you're gonna be in for a very rude awakening, because all the astrology, all the numerology, all these other aspects are really pointing in an entirely different direction.
Okay, so let's get to the juicy stuff, right? Because you said that we are no longer going to be experiencing business as usual. And you can see that we've been on the precipice of this change starting in 2020, right? With COVID and how that changed everything globally. And you can see that there's this tension between the old and what's coming, right? And this like push and pull thing happening, kind of like when someone is stepping into a new version of themselves, but the old version of them is sort of like, fighting to still remain. I kind of see that happening on a global level. So first, I want to start off by talking about what the energy was for 2024 and what that universal year number was and what we actually experienced and what we're transitioning into in 2025.
Well, so the universal year in numerology is it's a very easy calculation. First of all, start with the calculation. You just take the year. So if we're looking at this year that we're closing out on, 2024, you simply take 2024 and you take each digit and add it together. A very simple addition problem in math, right? So 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 4, that equals 8. So we have been in an 8 universal year. All right. So what does it mean though, universal year? All right. So sounds like something, but what does it sound like? Well, it sounds like that this is the energy that we can look at, that we are all experiencing globally. So it is everyone in the, on in the in the around the globe. Let's put it that way. I was going to say on the planet, but everyone around the globe, let's say, is experiencing this. The way I like to situate it is what's going on politically, right? It gives you those sweeping themes. I mean, right now, right here, right now, in this last year, we have military actions going on. We have been having a lot of climate change things that are happening in terms of weather occurrences, if you want to put it that way. We've had an election in the United States that has been a very tumultuous thing and continues to be. All of these things that are happening are what we can reflect upon when we think about the universal year, because it is, again, it's a global consciousness that we're working with. Now, then in numerology, we can go a little bit more microcosmic after that. So that's the macrocosm. That's what everyone, the umbrella. And then we can look at what we are experiencing as an individual, and we can look at that just briefly, after we discuss the global. So we can kind of, we can start digging down into the practicality of, okay, but what about me, right here, right now. So globally, in the eight in numerology is, those of you who have any idea about numbers and about numerology will say, ooh, that's the money number, right? Cha cha cha. So it's known as the money number, and yet to me, it is so much more than the money number. Yes, it always has to do with finances, with abundance, with manifestation, and the opposite, right? Whenever we're talking about numerology, we'll talk about the optimal components, right? What are the brightest and shiniest of this energy? What is being really demanded or asked of us? This is the invitation to really do the highest and best. And yet, when we're working with any of these numbers, we're always going to be faced with the opposing forces, either the overactive or the underactive elements. So that's a really important thing to understand as well, that we can get some really good intel about what to look out for, in this instance. So the eight overall, in my opinion, in terms of a cycle, it is always going to be the beginning of a 3-year intense transformation cycle. Okay. 891. So 8 is the beginning of that. And what that is a very dynamic, very intense, very step up or get stepped on energy. It's very much on the most exalted end. It is about using power versus force, using influence to help rather than to demolish. It is about a balance of power. It is about all of those higher forms of it, of the use of power, because the key words for the eight are money, power, control, and authority. So we can see very much so the eight at work in 2024. Lots of power struggles, lots of control issues from country to country, right? And a lot of money issues, a lot of things around greed, around avarice, and then on the other end of that spectrum, a lot of giving, a lot of heartfelt philanthropy and humanitarianism that is also blazing through this muck, right? So we have to look at how it's all coming out. And yet, to me, in tandem with the astrology and with the other spiritual dimensions that we are dealing with, this is just an unprecedented time. So I think that it is very escalated in terms of these power issues, power struggles. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to say that, right? And yet it is the beginning of this very, very monumental transition that we're all going through globally. So the eight was about that, and we can see, and feel. I mean, here we are, right, at the end of 2024. Now, what we're moving into in 2025 is the end of a cycle. It's the end of a cycle. So the 9 is about completions. It is about letting go. It is a high spiritual dimension. It is a highly spiritual vibration. In some forms of numerology, it is not used in certain calculations because of the sacred nature of the 9. All right. So the 9 is about that sort of, it's the highest level of universal wisdom. It is about soul integrity, personal integrity, about wisdom. It is about looking at all things interconnectedly and from a humanitarian focus, from let's look at the good of all, you know? And in terms of the energy here, it is about letting go of everything that is out, that is done. All the old stuff, right? All the old systems, all the old things are, and it's the way I like to envision it, the energy here, it's about the tide is out rather than in. It's more about the 8 year was more about doing, acting, making it happen. Like I always visualize like being in a canoe, going upstream, like na 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 na, just working and sweating and just, making something happen. Now in the 9 is where those paddles go in the boat, and you trust that you have moved your boat onto the correct stream and you just allow, right? And you just go with that flow and understand that you will arrive at your point of arrival. Where it is, when it is, all of that is up to the universe basically to do it. And so of course the tendency is to want to hang on, because none of us really enjoy not knowing. Let's put it that way, right? We really don't. We want some clarity, and clarity is just an illusion, first of all. And yet, in the nine, there's that feeling of despair, that feeling of emotional angst, of grief, really, of something dying, something leaving that's very profound. And we must sit and stay and be present in that liminal space. So it's that, even if we look up the word liminal in the dictionary, it's the place that is in, but you aren't where you were and you aren't where you're going. You're in the in between, right? So it's in that in between, and we must trust it. And not only trust it, we are the highest form of this is to appreciate, enjoy it, and savor it. Savor being in this liminal space. I mean, it's very much time to call in your spiritual practices, you know, reread that Eckhart Tolle book and talk about, get into being present with it, because the other form of it is kind of like, I always say the energy of the nine when it shows up as a cycle, as it is, it's kind of like literally or figuratively when you know someone who's in a relationship or someone who's in a marriage and it is dead, done, and gone, right? Like it's over, but neither of them want to give it up because of it's just what they're used to, right? And then one person finally decides that they're going to leave the relationship, but they don't do it until they have somebody else waiting in the wings, right? And then they split up with that one relationship they're in and just move that other person right in, right? And there's no moment. There's no self-reflection. There's no why did this happen? There's no wow, what about sitting still with myself for a moment, right? And so when we want to do that, that's when things don't go well. That's when they backfire on us, or that's, when we don't give it that time and space. So on a very basic level, globally right now, it's a, I mean, all the predictions are, all bets are off because this is a cataclysmic time and the numerology very much reflects that. The highest and positive of it is that it is taking us into a bigger, better, more evolved situation globally as a global community. It's not going to, again, not going to happen overnight and not going to be easy, but that's the ultimate, momentum is going that direction. And then B, it's about that despair and the hanging on and the denial and the resorting to that fear and separation. So that's the part of the nine that is the shadow. It's the shadow side of the nine. It wants to make you hang on, it wants to make you regret, it wants to make you angry, and it wants to make you bitter, and it wants to have you really, really feel like that we're all separate and that there are winners and losers and you want to be a winner. Right? And that is again the illusion of the that shadow side of the nine. So basically, this upcoming year is an absolute necessary cleaning out. It's a cleaning out period for all of us globally.
So when you say cleaning out, wow, thank you so much for kind of breaking down what we experienced in 2024 and what we are going to, potentially experience in 2025. And I can kind of see that tide already. I think most people listening to this can resonate with a lot of what you're saying. I want to kind of zero in on the global aspect a little bit more and kind of talk about what that could potentially look like, right? You talked about the um, good side of the nine, which is kind of settling into this new reality, releasing, letting go, and being still in the fact that the old paradigm is no longer going to be what it is. And then you talked about the shadow aspect of that, which is people holding on, trying their hardest to hold on to what is, reinforcing separation, which could also lead to a lot of like anger and despair, right? So can we just kind of talk about potentially, right, what that would look like on a global scale in terms of our government and political structures?
I mean, I think the most obvious is a lot of military action that can be taking place, and because it's about conquering, you know, and it's about that misuse or misunderstanding, if we want to put it more nicely, about control and power and authority and all the things that the eight was ushering in for us, because we're always building on on what's come before, right? It's not just a hard start, hard stop sort of situation. And so, I mean, to me, I feel like with the cacophony of all the other things that are going on, it's just going to be a lot of disintegration of things as we know them. And some of the most, I don't want to say simplest, but some of the things that we have come to count on in our daily lives, I think are going to be mutating. Again, we can go more macrocosmic, and I think that there's just going to be a lot of fighting. There's going to be a lot of that. I mean, we're looking right now at, I mean, all this drone activity that we've been having, and you can say drones, you can say whatever you want to say about all of this different activity, but we're having a lot of um, just very different things that none of us could have imagined, even a year ago, 2 years ago, right? In terms of how we operate, how the world is set up, and what's going on. So I think there's going to be even more of a dismantling of these elements of life before we begin to put any of the puzzle pieces together for what's coming up next.
Absolutely. A lot of things happened this year and with government hearings surrounding UFOs, which if you think about that, the idea of that a couple years ago, it would seem out of the realm of possibility that this would be a heavy topic,
A
or a
more
topic,
mainstream topic,
a
right?
mainstream topic. Yes. It
Mhm.
would be out of the realm of possibility that this would be a mainstream topic and it would garner so much attention. So you can definitely tell that a lot of the things that were hush hush that we weren't allowed to talk about or people would be gaslit to consider to be crazy, a lot of people are talking about it. And it's like you said, it's becoming more mainstream, right? So you can already see that paradigm shift. So thank you so much for explaining that. Now I kind of want to dig deeper into the micro of this, right? Because we talked about the macro, we were talking about it, the energy on a global scale, but we all know that individually, we all have our own personal year numbers. So, can you talk about that a little bit? What is the personal year? How can we calculate it? And how does our personal year often, coincide with the universal year?
Yeah, how does it show up within that? It's like the room or the house or whatever you're walking into. Like one year maybe it's like a frat house,
Yeah.
one year it's a funeral parlor. You just don't know. I mean, but it makes a difference how you show up in that environment. So the environment right now is going to be chaos. Okay, so let's just, put it in over there. That's what the environment is going to be. Now, for each of us individually with our personal year. So the personal year, is derived from your month of birth and your day of birth. Now, what I'm going to do is do a little bit of what do you call it? Housekeeping here. So what I want to say up front is that, well, first of all, I'll tell you what it is. So the personal year basically is to me like knowing, I always say, like knowing the theme to your party, right? It is every year there's this energy that is, we all feel it, whether we know what it is or not. Those of us who think that every year is supposed to trip by, same o, we always know that it really doesn't. So it's really great to look at this as a framework to go, oh, this is what the energy is supporting me with. It's very, very specifically. And I can also know what those challenges might be as well. And what also happens here is that with the personal year, I'm a numerologist who always talks about schools of thought, right? There are different ways of doing everything. You can go to a doctor with the same symptoms and go to three different doctors and get three different diagnoses, right? So it's the same with any of these modalities. So really it's up to each of us to decide what feels right for us. All right. That is upfront. So with that said, though, this can be a little bit confusing, but I'll attempt to make it as clear as possible. All right. There are two schools of thought about the personal year. The most common and the most popular, if you want to put it that way, is that the personal year runs year to year. So it's like a calendar year, the 12 months of January 1st through December 31st. The energy would peak around or intensify around your birthday time, whenever that might be for you. And also, there's a peak time in September for everybody's personal year. All right. So that's the first mode of thought. The second one is it gets just a little bit complex, but not really. You just have to get your brain wrapped around it. So the second school of thought is that the personal year actually is your personal year, and it goes like a solar return in astrology. For those who are astrology minded, it goes from birthday to birthday. All right. So now, if that's the case, if you're born in, January, February, it still makes a difference, but it's still a little bit more negligible. But once you get into June and, past that, it can really be a good thing to feel out how this feels for you. So now what I'll do is give you the calculation, very simple one, and then show you how it might show up with either mode of thought. All right. And do you mind if we use we're just using your birthday, your birth month, and your birthday?
Sure.
We don't use your year. All
Okay.
right. So you are born on September, and it is 26th. Yeah, September 26th. Had to use my glasses there to make sure. So what you will do is use your month, your day, and you take your year and put it over on, the table. And what you will do is use the current year. Just a sidebar here, if you want to know, man, I got my divorce in 2016. I wonder what personal year that was. Use 2016 and do the same formula. If you want to know what your personal year is going to be in 5 years, do the same thing. All right. So you can do it that way. It's really cool if you really do get into numerology. I have done this, of course, is that I've gone back through my life and mapped out all of my personal years. And it's really informative to look and see what was going on, to see how the numerology plays out for you. So with that said, though, we will look at September is a number 9. Okay, let's say you were born in December. It's a 12. You take the 1 and the 2, add it together, and it would be a 3. So in numerology, we're always taking a 2-digit or more, and we're reducing it to a 1-digit. All right. So now we'll take the 26. That's the day you were born. 2 plus 6 equals 8. All right. Then if we're going to look at 2025, let's say we're looking at 2025, which is, we already know, a 9. 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 5. So now we're going to add 9, 8, and 9. So 9 plus 9 is 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. 2 plus 6 equals 8. All right. So that is a number 8 personal year for 2025. Now, that would be beginning January 1st for you if we go for mode A, the first mode of thought, right? Now, if we think about the second mode of thought, you moved into this 8 um and well, let me put it this way. You are in a 7 and continue to be in a 7 until your birthday in September in 2025. So in essence, to use this formulation, you use the date, the year of your last birthday. Okay? So that would be the trick to that, so to speak. Not the trick, but the way to think about it. So that would mean that, for the next 9, 10 months, you are still in a 7 that you have been in. And if we looked at the other way, you are almost done with your 7. With the
Mm.
second mode of thought, you are just kind of getting started. Okay.
Okay. Okay. But that makes
Does
such a
that make
huge
sense?
difference. Yes,
Yes, it makes a huge
yeah,
difference.
it makes sense. So just to make sure the listeners understand, there are
Yes,
two modes of thought here when it comes to calculating your personal year. For some people, they believe their personal year starts when the year starts, right? So it has nothing to do with their birthday. It will run from January 1st to December 31st. The second mode of thought is that their personal year starts on their birthday the previous year to their upcoming birthday in the upcoming year. So technically, if we were looking at that second mode of thought, my personal year would be 7, which started in September 26th,
2024,
2024, and it would last up until September 26th, 2025.
2025.
Right.
Correct.
So I guess to that point, it's up to the individual to figure out what energy they're resonating with the most to
Exactly.
determine how they want to calculate their personal year.
Correct.
What
And
what
it,
mo
yeah, and it's just feeling into it.
Yeah, and so what mode do you resonate with on a personal level the
Oh,
most?
well, you know what? That's a really interesting question because um, we were talking before we went on about we talk about what has shifted for us. This is one thing that has shifted for me. And you can do something forever and change your mind. Or I think many of us can if we're open, right? If we contain this open mind. And I have always, I mean, at the beginning of my numerology practice, I went back and forth. And I was like, which one feels right to me? Well, and I would give it time and all that. And I pretty much really lodged in with the year to year, with the, January 1st to December 31st. And I have to tell you, these last 2 years, I have felt a shift for me in my thoughts about it for me personally, which I have moved over to the birthday to birthday thought, um, just because of my personal experience, which you don't need to hear about because it's like, all right, Felicia, it's not a therapy session. We're talking, but you know what I mean? It becomes the therapy session because like, well, that happened and then this happened and then this happened and then that reflected on that. So in that way, I feel very definitively for me that the past 2 years in particular have really resonated with me birthday to birthday. And then if I then step back and do a review, like even of just the last decade, I can get some different feelings, different resonances about what was going on at certain times. So oftentimes what I want to be really clear about is that we can use this in any way that we want to. And the only way I think that we are supposed to use it and that I use it is for good, is for inspiration, for the positivity that it brings. If we are so stuck on something and we can't get out of bed without reading our horoscope or looking at our numbers, we need to throw that away for a moment, right? We need to get out of our own way. We need to begin to trust our own feelings, our own intuition, our own stuff. This is only used as an additive, you know? It's not meant to be a crutch. It's not meant to be an excuse. It's not meant to be anything other than giving you ways for inspired action, I think, in life.
Absolutely. So, it's interesting that you said that you have resonated with the birthday to birthday mode in the last 2 years. I feel I haven't really looked at my personal year or really studied it, but I will say that over the last couple of years, I feel a tremendous energy shift on my birthday. I feel
Hmm.
it tremendously. So, with that in mind, I'm inclined to feel like I would potentially resonate with the birthday to birthday personal year modality more than the year to year. But I've
Hmm.
never studied it enough or gone back to kind of see, okay, if I look at it from mode one, what are those energies? If I look at it from mode two, what are those energies to really compare? But I will say energetically, I feel a tremendous shift during the time of my birthday, right? It's kind of like a light bulb goes off in my head, and I enter this new paradigm of thought and understanding, or knowing, or actions that I need to take, right? So
Yes.
I find that very interesting, and I don't know if we have time for this. Please let me know. Are you able to kind of give like a super high level of if you're a one personal year, how is that going to affect you in 2025 and so on and so
Absolutely.
forth?
Absolutely. So let's just do little nutshells, okay? Little moments because let's just start with one. I mean, it's a good place to start because again, this is a cycle of time 1 through 9 and it just keeps rinsing and repeating, right? And so the one is just what it sounds like. The one is new beginnings. It's the beginning of a cycle. So you've just come out of the nine, which is, getting rid of all the stuff that is clogging the pipes and getting in our way, right? That needs to make an exit. So the one is more about independence. It's more about taking independent action. It's about new starts, new beginnings. It's about everything new, and it's about taking initiation. It's being taking initiation, taking your initiative here. And usually that is a welcome relief because often in the nine, if you're trying to do things, like make things happen, usually it is just blown back in your face so hard. You're like, I can't make anything happen. It's like, yes, because this is time to let things, move out rather than begin things. So the one is often very much about your career. And it can be with relationships, but it will challenge you with codependencies. And if you are in a codependent relationship or something of that nature, it's going to really give you opportunities to heal that or to change that. So what I also find is that we can make some really we can have some really great observations about things that happen to us, so to speak, during these times, because they're always going to be our teachers. They're always going to be those opportunities to learn what this theme is for you during this time. It can be a year where if you're not starting something, if you're feeling really low with self-esteem, with all of that, if you're just not stepping up, it can be really hard. I mean, it can just feel like you're stuck, like you're not moving forward, and that can be something that can be a challenge point of the one. In a nine universal year, that's a little push and pull, isn't it? In the universe, everything else is like, just burning down. And you're supposed to be starting a new cycle in your life. So it's going to be, but the beautiful part of both of them is that every every new beginning is some other beginning's end, right? So you really have to think about it that way and to understand that your new beginnings are going to be pretty profound in this time and place. All right. So the two personal year, it can be a two or it can be a master number 11 too. But overarch, I won't go into to the details around that, just to understand that if you come up with that mathematically, that is a master number, the double one, the 11, and it can show up as a personal year. But the two is kind of meant as a resting time because you've been through the 8, 9, and 1, baby, right? You're like, you deserve a break. Or you deserve also, it's not so much a break, it's kind of like a gestation period. It's kind of like that. It's like a pregnancy because in your one personal year, you've planted the seeds, and now you get to patiently cultivate those seeds. And while you are, so there'll be bursts of activity, but it's almost like, you might go metaphorically weed the garden, plant, maybe even some of those plants die and you dig them up and, put them in the compost, whatever. But what are you doing on, just sitting on the porch and staring at them, watching them? No, that's a time where relationships take front and center seat. It's all about us rather than me. It's also for networking for those of us who, if you're in business and all of that, it's less about that terse little email or that, whatever marketing campaign. It's more like, who are my ideal clients? Who is my tribe? Who do I want to be hanging out with, right? So that can be a very deep year for that. It's very emotionally sensitive, psychically sensitive, all of those things. And you're really learning how to, not to be too corny about it, but in a two personal year, you're learning to discipline your sensitivities. Either open up to being sensitive, or learning how to discipline those sensitivities so they aren't driving, so they aren't in the driver's seat of your life. In a nine, that's, I think, the endings and all of that you're in, you're going to be much more focused on home and family and on your relationship dynamics and keeping that tight and keeping that safe, so to speak. So then if you're in a three personal year, the three is the number of joy, optimism. It's a very social year, communicative year, creative year. It is a self-improvement year. And it's not so much self-improvement in terms of, it always sounds so negative, right? With self-improvement, something that isn't, good enough. It's not about that. It's about kind of sandblasting all the crap off of who you really are. And so, depending on the levels of that, of what's covering up, often it can be a time where you are in creation mode. So, if you are a creator, if you're a writer, an actor, a musician, an artist, or whatever, it is creative, just a cacophony of creative energy that you should let it loose, let it, do all of that at that time. It can be a time for travel, a time for pleasure, a time for enjoyable things, right? The darker side of that is that it might serve up all your emotional trauma to you on a little silver platter. So you get to work with how you express, how in relationships, it might be a time where your partner comes to you and says, "Hey, this isn't working for me. I don't even know who you are anymore." Or I don't know, and that kind of stems from that two personal year. It kind of bridges in from that. So it can be a hard one for some people because it demands that you really look and explore and do some deeper dive into healing your trauma. And it can be, go to therapy. It can be all kinds of, ways to do that. So then if we go into the four personal year, oh, and in a nine, once again, there's a lot going on, and it's going to be a time where you might use the force of all that's going on in the world to inspire, and I mean that truly, to inspire some of your creativity. It can be a time maybe where you write a book about this, where you write poetry, where you get out there and you want to teach or share, because the three is about inspiring and motivating and uplifting. So that can really add fuel to what you're doing in a three personal year. So a four is all about, it's serious business during a four, right? And you are a four, you're a 22, so you're a master number. So you know all about this. You're like, yeah, bring it on. So, and yeah, it's a funny thing to think about that too, because for instance, it also depends on your numerology profile, because someone like you're going to enter a four like it's like you're entering a candy store, because it's you, it's what you value, it's who you are. You're going to really, if you're in it, you're going to really optimize that. Now, a five life path going into a four, it's going to feel like they're chewing nails. They don't want it. They're like, none of this hard work stuff. I want to go travel again and I want to frolic. I want to do that. And I'm making an overarching statement here. Fives are not all like that, but I'm just using that as a funny example. But so the four personal year is about getting your ducks in a row. It really is a time where you're looking up and going, wow, okay, what is my life's business plan? Let's get that on the table. Let's see if it's still valid after, after this new beginnings I went through 3 years ago. Now we're moving into this four, and it's about foundations. It's often where you can move home, move into a different house, apartment, build, remodel, all of those things, start a family, get married, do those things that are very home-based, foundational, where you feel anchored. It's where you're asking where you feel anchored and whether you feel anchored, whether you feel secure, whether you feel, safe, and all of those aspects. It is a time to systematize things, right? So it's about the step by step by step by step of getting there in a four personal year. It can feel arduous. There can be limitations during this time, but at the end, you will look back and go, holy cow, look at all that's been accomplished, right? In a nine personal year, it's going to be kind of interesting because coming up with that kind of longer range plan on these shifting sands can feel maybe a little overwhelming. And so I think those in the four personal year are probably going to have that idea in the back of their mind that we are in an accelerated time where if they come up with a, metaphorically or even literally speaking, another, business plan, maybe it's not a 10-year business plan, maybe it's a 1 to 3 year, and then we'll check in on that to see how that goes. So then we go to the five personal year. Even if you visualize the 1 through 9, the five is the middle point, right? We're in the middle, and it is a time of change. Whenever the five shows up, it's ushering in some change. It's a year where it feels kind of topsy-turvy, roller coastery, new people, new experiences, new things. It's kind of like the bright and shiny objects. It's where you, on a personal level, it's like someone drenched you in pheromones. And and if you're single, ready to mingle, it is a great year for that kind of exploration. If you're in a partnership, it's time to kind of, play a little more, up the ante, bring in more of that sensual, sexual energy in your life. And travel is favored during this time. And at the end of this period, there will be a dramatic change. And if there isn't, you're going to be kind of miserable that nothing changed, because the underneath is that I need it, I want it, I feel it. Something's going to move, something's going to pivot. And if you don't allow it to, then you get to pay that price, right? And the way that happens is the five also if ushers in fear. So go back to your Joseph Campbell, and whatever your biggest fear is, just walk into that room and start having a conversation with it. And I always think about that. It's again, corny as it may be, it's like, how long does Dorothy spend going after the Wicked Witch of the West and The Wizard of Oz, right? Like 3.5 hours or something is that movie. And at the end, she just throws a bucket of water and she melts. And it's that sort of idea that the biggest fears that we harbor are usually the ones that could pretty much be pretty easily dismantled if we chose to walk into that space and chose to do that. So that is an invitation that comes in during a five. It can also be a time of excess. So if you have tendencies for, too much drugs, too much sex, too much drinking, too much work, I mean, it could go anyway. It can push that excess. So just be cognizant that you need to kind of, modulate that. Nothing succeeds like excess, right? I use like anyway. So then we go to the six. Oh, and that I keep forgetting the nine in that. So the nine with the five, I think they go pretty well together because it's both about shaking things up, and it's both about just, being along for the ride and in many ways enjoying the ride, right? Not thinking that you're missing out on anything or that anything is here to stay, right? Let's just enjoy that. So that's how that can meet up. The sixth personal year, if the five was more about self-indulgence, the six is more about others and about your responsibilities and about family. Again, this is a should I stay or should I go year, or should it stay or should it go? It really is all about an evaluation of relationships from you all the way up and out, right? So it can, and a lot of responsibilities can come your way this time. It's a great magnetic time for business as well if you're in a service-oriented space in that way. The deficit to this is that you can just feel if you're learning how to either step up to the plate to your responsibilities, or especially most women, I know I'm going to be pretty sexist here, but most women are learning how to put healthy boundaries around the way that they take responsibility in their relationships. So that it's a year to, haul out your Brene Brown or whoever that is a support where you can get to understand how vulnerability, how boundaries, how all of these things might operate for you. And it can be a time when you feel really judgy and feel really controlling about things. So just to have that understanding about the six is a powerful thing. It's a time where you can get married, where you can get divorced, where there are a lot of things with kids, again, with family, anything having to do with the family, with home. It again, kind of like the four, it can be a time for home-based um, things, whether it's moving, redecorating, that sort of thing. Uh, in cahoots with the nine energy, there's going to be simply a lot of focus on keeping your family safe and keeping things secure. There's just going to be a little bit more of a focus on that. And the six brings in issues related to justice and to fairness and that sort of thing. So you might find yourself, moving left or right of center in terms of wanting to take action around certain things that maybe, you didn't before, but now you're feeling like, yeah, I've got to really do something and use my voice to seek justice in whatever situation it might be, or whatever, you know what I mean, something like that. So then we get to the seven. The seven is, if the six was all about everybody else and all of that, the seven is your permission slip to contemplate your own navel. So it feels lower energy. It feels a little hermit-y, It feels like people are, inviting you out and you're like, I just want to get on my gym jams and read my weird spiritual book that I'm halfway through. So it's a very soul-seeking year. It is very deep, very transformative. It is all about planning, organizing, uh, researching, knowledge gathering. So it's more a time for like a sabbatical, so to speak. It's more of the time to go to a retreat rather than, I always say, like a alcohol fueled time in Cabo. You know what I mean? It's like go for that. And it can be a time of deep, deep feelings of bringing up where you feel victimized in life and coming to the table to put that in front of God, or in front of, it is a matter of really connecting spiritually to yourself and to whatever your belief systems are. That it's a time that might test your faith. Sometimes I'll say a difference, and it this isn't how it always shows up, but just as an example, like in a nine personal year, often you will divorce your partner. In a seven, often your partner will divorce you, right? It's something that happens to you. And then you get to kind of wallow around in that and wonder, what. So it's about trust, trusting yourself, trusting the flow, trusting the universe. And again, if we connect that with a nine, oh my gosh, it's going to be a lot, you know, it's going to be a lot to process and a lot to get to to strip away the superficial, right? And to really get to the meat of the matter, so to speak. And then after that seven, you've got the eight. The eight is the beginning of that 3-year transition cycle, and it is power. It is empowerment and money. But I think at the very, very get-go, it is about personal empowerment. If you don't have that, all the other stuff cannot manifest, right? So it's about taking yourself seriously, getting a backbone, standing up for yourself, getting serious about yourself, getting serious about who you are, what you want. You know how you meet people and you're like, well, what do you do? Well, I'm just again, silly example. Oh, I do tarot, but it's just I really love it, but it's just I just do it for free for my friends. Well, what if you didn't just do it for free for your friends? What if you really stepped into the ownership of how much you know about this and all of that? An example of how the eight might kind of kick you up the ladder. It's like, really? You want this? How much do you want it? It's a little bit like boot camp. And it will ask you how much you want it. And you better want it, because you're going to have to really go after it. It's not pie in the sky, things drop in your lap. Sometimes they can, but mostly it's about, I want this and I'm going to do everything in my power to get it. So it has that kind of intensity around the eight, and it will test you. It will test you in every way. The eight is a testing number, and it's a magnet. It magnifies whatever it is in contact with. So all at all times in life, cleaning up our thoughts and being very, clear and specific about that is vital for the law of attraction and everything else to happen. Particularly double down on that in your eight. Really get into your positive affirmations, your good visualizations, the dialogue that you speak to yourself is a really powerful one during the eight, because that stuff will manifest. All right. So in the nine globally, I would think that it can go two directions. You could really go into how can I capitalize on this mayhem and, squeeze everything out of it for me. Or it can be how can I empower myself and help empower other people? How can I use my influence to actually make a difference in this really dramatically changing world? And what do I value? I mean, it's going to call all of us up to that plate, right? What are our true values, and how do we define those and act upon those, right? So then, if we do the get to the nine in a nine, and just if you're in a nine personal year in this nine universal year, just understand that you all throughout your life are in the same universal year as your personal year. So for you as an individual, the energy is always doubled for you just throughout your life. So you're like, oh, that in itself could explain a lot. Right? It really can. And so it's like, ooh, super intense. And my life has always been super intense. And that can explain part of that, at least part of it. So the nine, again, endings, letting go. What do I need to release that is no longer serving a positive function in my life? And just let go, surrender, release. And it is a time where it's kind of like a retro, it's kind of like retrograde in astrology. It's all the rewords, you're reviewing, you're, removing, you're doing all the the things in a nine personal year. And when that's piggybacked on the nine universal year, just let go. I mean, just hop onto that water slide and just enjoy the ride, because if you try to hang on, it's gonna, like, even if you think about that going down the water slide, you try to hang on to something, it's gonna rip your arm off. I mean, let's just, right? Let's just be honest. So just really go with that flow and know and trust that the bigger, the better, the more in alignment with you is waiting on the other side.
Thank you so much for walking us through each personal year and how they coincide and how it could coincide with the 9 universal year that's coming up in 2025. Very interesting, right? Because I think the biggest takeaway from all of this is that every number has a ideal side to it and a shadow side to it. So, it's important to kind of pay attention to, are we on the shadow side of these things, or are we on the ideal side of the energies that are influencing us from these numbers, which is, I think, very, very interesting. And with everything that you're talking about in terms of change, and we're not going back to the old paradigm. I mean, that is evidently a theme. You don't have to be in numerology or astrology to figure that out. I mean, again, with the COVID um pandemic, with AI, with just so many things, so many systems have been shaken by so much change that we could not even imagine. And even what's going on in Hollywood, right? With all of the stuff that's coming out, so much change. And it kind of makes me want to touch on the point you brought up about Pluto moving from Capricorn. I know you're not an astrologer per se, but I think you have a sense of what the energy is from Pluto in Capricorn moving to Pluto in Aquarius. So, what is the significance of Pluto being in Aquarius at this time?
Well, it's an air sign, and it's more, and Aquarius is the future. I mean, it is futuristic. I mean, in my very basic, as I start to say, all the astrologers out there are probably gritting their teeth right now, but it is that the forward mover, the forward thinker, the futurist, and it is all about the collective, right? Aquarius, it's, that the old musical Hair, the age of Aquarius. And we are truly moving into that, because Pluto is not only death and destruction, it's not that in a negative way to me. It is the dismantling and the destruction of what needs to go in order for something else to be built in its place that is more powerful and more relevant, right? To who we are and what we want to become. And therefore, Pluto is also, from my understanding, the giver of wealth and gifts, if you really dig down into it. So there's a lot of aspects here that you can go and dig around in if you're interested in the astrology. And yet, Capricorn, what we're just leaving, that earth sign, all about accomplishment and doing and the practicalities and the systems and all of those things, that Capricorn is now relieved of its duty. And we're moving more into this. I mean, AI couldn't be more successfully positioned in terms of this astrological alignment, right? And no mistakes with all of this, and just systems in general, just the way in which. I mean, I'm sure that this is not a brilliant observation, but the way in which everything operates, the way in which we um, get our information, the way in which things are delivered, the way in which we work on a day-to-day basis, everything is different, right? Than it has been. Again, I think 2020 is the big dividing line for that, but definitely things are shifting significantly there. What we value, what will we pay for, all of those aspects are really, really mutating and changing now. So to me, Pluto in Aquarius is all about the collective, all about the community and the highest and best, and yet it's and futuristic things. So how do we use AI in a way that might benefit the collective rather than control it, right? So these are big question marks, I find.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest takeaway I would like the audience to take away from our discussion today is to not be afraid. I think
Right.
change is a part of life, it's a part of our journey as human beings. And in life, there are endless cycles. So we are at the end of one cycle and we're transitioning into a new cycle. And with change and transition, there's a lot of uncertainty. And sometimes there's a lot of chaos, right? When you even think about childbirth, the idea of birthing a new child is a beautiful thing, right? But the process of it is very hard and very painful and chaotic, right? But all for good things. So
Hmm.
I just want everyone listening to this to still maintain a sense of groundedness and not be overwhelmed or be afraid. It's just kind of like this is the reality of what's happening, but you should not be afraid. It's just part of the next frontier of, you know, human existence, human life, human consciousness.
It's
And it's
exciting.
exciting. Yes, it's very exciting.
It is. And I've used this story before because it's true and it's real. And I think it's appropriate with the birth analogy that you were making because when I gave birth to my second child, my second daughter, it was totally different than my first one. And as a woman, you just think, "Oh, I've already had one baby. I'll have another one and it'll be just the exactly the same." Well, it was so different. It floored me and I was so overwhelmed and confused. And I remember being there and I was kind of hyperventilating. I mean, it was just this massively different experience. And I remember my nurse midwife, who was hilarious. She was this crusty woman named Sandy. And she said, "All right, all right, all right, just look at me." She's like, "Just focus." And I'm like, "Okay." And she says, "So where does it hurt the most?" I was like, right down here, by my tailbone, whatever. I don't. And she was like, "All right, now shut your eyes. Bring yourself right down there. Get right in the middle, exactly where it hurts the most." She's like, "Are you there?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Now push right there." And that's where it pushed. And a couple minutes later, my baby was born. And so when you're pushing into the pain, it actually kind of nullifies the pain. It quickens the birthing process. So I think that it's a really good analogy in reality to look at the pain is part of the birthing process. But if you cannot try to avoid that pain, if instead you go right into it, and just push into the pain and then it transmutes. It really does. It doesn't even feel like pain anymore. It feels like this fabulous vibrating energy that has a whole different resonance than it does when you simply are trying to detour around it or avoid it because it's pain, right? It's an interesting thing. I know it's a little maybe odd to talk about it that way.
It was
But
perfect. I think that was
okay.
a powerful analogy. And I love that you said that so much. And yes, I felt that really deeply. Thank you so much for sharing that with the audience. This has been a great conversation. You shared a lot of gems. So I almost feel like, do you have another shift in perspective to share with the audience? Since,
I think my shift at what if I just pull one out of the ethers because there's been so many. Those out there listening, it's like, how many shifts can you go through, right? So, and it's fun though to really, I think one of the major shifts I've gone through in my numerology practice is again rethinking the whole personal year thing. So that's one of them. But the other thing is really rethinking and shifting value systems and what I really find important and what I really am willing to put my heart, soul, and energy into. And that has really undergone and undergoing a major shift right now.
thank you so much for sharing that. Where can people go if they want to learn more about you, connect with you, and yeah, talk to you?
It would be my website. So that's Felicia FeliciaBender.com. So FeliciaBender.com. And we've got free forecasts, a lot of free information there. And then you can take classes. I offer certification. I offer one-on-ones, all things numerology at FeliciaBender.com.
Thank you so much, Felicia. And I want to say one other thing and let me know if you agree with this. Again, for the listeners, please don't hyper focus on your personal year number and the universal number all of 2025. Just take a look at it if you're interested, but I encourage you to just live your life at the same time. But it's good to kind of know the energies that could be influencing you in the upcoming year. Thank you, Felicia, again for stopping by Shifting Dimensions.
Thank you.